Hello and welcome to the Digi-Tools and Accrual World Podcast, place to go for all your UK accounting tech news. This episode is sponsored by Unleashed and we're excited, happy, joyous to be joined by them a bit later on in the show, as well as Employment Hero. But before we get into any of that, I should welcome one of my co-hosts because we're missing one today. We've only got you today, John.
I know. I believe Indy's disappearing off to somewhere sunny. Again, this seems to be like a recurring theme. Maybe it's because you and I are both pale and pasty. Like too much sunshine is unhealthy for us. But yeah, I think, is it a cousin's thing in I don't know, Spain or Portugal or whatever? I don't know.
Any excuse to go somewhere sunny. I think we're just jealous, really, aren't we, John? Because it's now
absolutely
wet and miserable in the UK, and as we approach winter, and it would be nice to go somewhere sunny. Not, as you say, not too sunny, not maybe Sahara sunny, but maybe Southern Europe sunny would be nice.
Like Bournemouth sunny.
That's said by a true Mancunian. That you think Bournemouth is the place to go at this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely wouldn't know. But yeah, I don't think, to be fair to India, I don't think she needs an excuse to get away from us too generally this year. It's like whatever it takes. You and I will make up for whatever we lose with Indy not being here. We can more than make up for it and trying to be sensible and keeping on track. So let's see if we stick to that.
Look, we talked a lot about Indy going away on holiday, but John, you're always out at conferences. I'm surprised you're around. Have you got any conferences coming up?
I do. I've got some events coming up. Yeah, I've got a thing in London in early November, which is like an innovation symposium, which is going to be quite exciting, like a bit of a hackathon. And then I'm doing something with the alternative events guys, part of their roadshows, because they're in Manchester in a few weeks as well. And then after that, I'm going to be in Vegas and then in Washington for 2 conferences. Yeah, not too bad. It's not.
What are you doing in Vegas?
I'm with some of our HLB North America colleagues to go through the audit, tax and advisory conference that they do at the end of the year.
Sounds thrilling. I'm really missing out on that one. But no, I've got pretty much no conferences left for the 2025. Right. I'm not sure when the QuickBooks one is. That's usually early 2026. Well,
I have just been invited to QuickBooks Connect today, and it starts in a week's time. They must be really desperate if they're sending me an invite for a week from today. And that is in Vegas as well. I'm like, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to have to miss out.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it's down in Bournemouth, and that's why you had it on the mind. But, okay, the one in Vegas, and they're reaching out to UK accountants. Weeks ago, do you think they're desperate, mate? Do you think they're struggling to get attendees?
I think if they're inviting me, that is probably the analysis I would make for sure. Yeah. Who knows? I've never been to QuickBooks Connect. I've not even been to the infamous ones that they used to do in the UK back in the day. But yeah, I'm up for going. But at short notice like this, I'd have to accommodate my very high demands.
Your rider. So I think the other thing is that we need to QuickBooks Connect, but they're now changing from QuickBooks to Intuit. And so we need to get into our heads. It's Intuit Connect, and it's going to be Intuit platform, no longer QuickBooks going forward.
True. And actually, I think to be fair, it does say Intuit Connect on the email. So there you go. So even I haven't been brainwashed yet. So clearly that needs to take effect.
We'll cling on to the QuickBooks name like Marathon for as long as we possibly can. And I think that's probably a perfect time to get away from our rambling intro and straight into our initial conversation with Unleashed. We are back with Ben Carter, product director at the small business. Oh God, I can't get them out. I still can't do it. Let's try it. Third time lucky. Small business division at Access. And if I can't say it, Ben, try and even explain it.
Just brilliant, Ryan. So the small business division is the division of Access Group that looks after small businesses. Surprise, Ryan. And there's a number of product lines in there that your listeners might know. So you've got Unleash for inventory management. You've got MintSoft for warehouse management. You've got a StockAware CRM called Prospect. And then you've got a really good end-to-end job management for tradies called Tradify.
Yeah, and these are all great products, ones we've talked about on the show many times. But we introed this a little bit in the last discussion we had with you. But I'm really keen to understand, what's the vision? What are you trying to achieve with this? Because I know that Access have acquired these, but there must be a plan, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think our vision in our division is really to become the most recommended software providers for small businesses we think that actually being the most recommended is the best indicator of success. I don't know whether you're familiar with sort of NPS and those kind of indicators, but we think getting someone to recommend you is the best endorsement. So we want to be the most recommended for small business. And so in terms of our mission, we talk a lot about achieving value, and value in about 7 minutes. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly 7 minutes or 5 minutes, but I think what we reflect with the small business customers, and I suspect your listeners can appreciate this, is that time is just so precious. A lot of the people that we work with, the people who buy our products are the ones that use them. This isn't like an enterprise product where it's bought by some procurement or vendor management and then dished out. And all the people we work with who buy our product directly use it. So we've got to establish value quickly or they'll just abandon it. So that value in 7 minutes is really important for us. Yeah. So I think that's really key, for us, Ryan.
Yeah, and I think that's actually in person to our discussions, Ben, where it seems to be we're trying to get as much value out of these for our listeners in around 7 to 10 minutes. So I now feel pressured that we have to get the value out there to emulate what you're doing as a business. But yeah, I think that's a great metric, the recommended. But how do you benchmark that? Where do you get stats to do it? How do you know what is great? Or is it just you've got your own internal targets that you're after?
Yeah. We look at a bunch of different metrics throughout the experiences. So think about a lot of our products are trial based. So we find that a lot of small businesses don't like big upfront contracts, don't want to talk to sales. They want to trial something before they buy it. So thinking about how we can get them value quickly in that trial. We're doing some really awesome work at the moment. Did you know that basically if you upload your own data into one of our trials, you're twice as likely to then go on and purchase. So that's amazing. So when people put their own data in it, they get to see the product working with their own information. They generally really like it. So we're now doing work to make sure we make it easier to put your data in our product, for example. So I think that those elements are ways we would measure showing that value in a short period of time.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, right? Because it needs to be tangible. You need to feel it like it's your product you're going to be used to forever. And if you put something in and you start to go through it, you'll know, oh, this is the little nuance that I do with this business or this process. Can the system do that? Or how do I use the system to do that? And so how are you tweaking that? How are you reimagining getting the data into the system?
In that particular example, we're actually, you're surprised, Ryan, we're using AI. So we actually have I kid you not. So we have it's, you know what, it's slightly embarrassing to admit publicly, but I think the process today isn't great. So we ask you to fill in some templates. We upload templates to a standard that we specify, like your product, your SKU information, things like that. And it's not easy. So now we built a little AI agent that goes and you just upload any old document and we parse it and we say, oh, there's your product, there's your SKU lines, and we take it. So it's really easy. So I think that's one example. I think the other thing we're doing is to simply make you feel more comfortable in the space. We know a lot of customers, if you have to show imagery and language around food and beverage, for example, and that already the environment feels more familiar. And that's really important. So there are just a couple of examples. We're trying to make you more comfortable with the product quicker.
Yeah, I'm going to dive into one thing you said there, because I think it's critical, not only for that initial step in the trial, but when you get to the point where you're like, okay, actually, I've now made the decision. I really want to roll this system out. But legacy like data is a challenge. And also just getting initial information in for the live date. So are you bringing this kind of AI, not only just to ingest some information, but to do the elements of onboarding as part of your process?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we're testing at the moment is just with product information, because for us, for Unleashed, product information is really everything. Then after that, we'll be using other elements as well. There's also another trust aspect to it as well, because some people don't want to input their own information, right? So we're having to say, look, your experience will be better if you do this, but don't worry if you don't choose to go ahead, we won't take your information, that kind of thing. But I do think this is a challenge that a lot of SaaS vendors have, is to feel relevant to those customers quickly without being generic. And we're quite specialist, right? We do specialist systems, inventory management, but still inventory management, there are lots of different businesses that have inventory management requirements, right? So how do you stand out to a manufacturer versus some sort of creator of e-commerce warehousing, perhaps? So I think that's just a challenge we all have to work around.
Yeah, of course. Like scoping is still critical, and whether the business is doing it themselves or they're using a consultant, getting the flow and getting the I guess the understanding of what the system can do and can't do, the limitations and maybe workarounds is always very important. But something that I know you're also doing is, because I guess you've got this small business unit, we talked in the prior chat we had about creating a look and feel across all of those that's similar, and they've all got great user interfaces. So that must be a real challenge to try and bring all the brilliant aspects of each one together.
Yeah, I mean, not only is it a challenge, it is a bit difficult. There are brands that people feel really passionate about. They're brands that have a lot of legacy out there in the world, and we don't want to diminish that brand, but we also reflect that people want a unified look and feel. We know that a lot of our customers, there might be turnover challenges, people come and go. They don't want to have to retrain everybody all the time. They want simplicity. So actually, I think you'll see that more and more with Access products, is that the moment they're very much their own identities. Unleash looks very different to MintSoft. MintSoft looks very different to Prospect or Tradify. But I think over time, you'll see some commonalities, which will mean that you'll be able to work across them. And actually, it's worth pointing out, it's not just about how things look, it's how they work in the back end as well. You mentioned it earlier, right, about integrations. You want your MintSoft data to talk to your Unleash data, and that should just be out of the box, right? And that's, I think, is one of the power of Accesses. And I think, again, I've only been with a company like 8 months, so I'm not an expert on strategy here, but I think that's very much a direction change, that they're saying, actually, united, we are so much better. So bringing together these products together to work together and feel the same, I think is really important. So expect more on that.
Definitely. I feel the slogan, "United we are strong," is coming.
As well as SV something or other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That one, you credit me with that one. So the other bit I think that I'm seeing, right, is it superpowers each individual tool. So Tradify always aimed at those very small, those very small traders, but from the integration into Unleash, which I know now is in existence, it means that you can now do a lot more with stock, with inventory management inside or on parallel with Tradify. So once again, now that little system on its own now becomes a bigger platform as you grow. So it means you can scale essentially. Is that part of what I guess the small business unit is also about? Is that scaling, but within?
Yeah, I think we all probably also need to say that people scale for different reasons, and there will be some people that simply don't want to scale. You only want to be so big. We talk to tradies all the time that are quite happy at their size. They don't want to be a big empire. But yeah, as you grow, you would expect the products around you to help in that growth. And certainly the way that we've tiering our products now to grow with you, and not just about you as a business, but perhaps you with digital maturity. I don't know if this strikes a chord with a lot of your listeners, but that is something that we encounter all the time. With small business, we're often working with people who, I'm not replacing incumbents, Ryan, right? I'm mostly replacing paper and pencils half the time. Excel, we actually have a phrase for it. We call it digital paper, which is essentially like they have got, Google Sheets and they're doing their best. So I think that's where we're encountering people. So absolutely, we're that first point. Now, should they go off and graduate, Access has got tons of mid-market solutions. Should they go there, then fine. We offer them a great place and a way to work with us that perhaps is more suited to a small business.
And I guess if people want to know more about how you're doing this and how you're offering it through the product, you have a webinar coming up. When is it and how do people find out about it?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that, Ryan, and I'm really glad I wrote it down. So that is on the 17th of November at 9 p.m. Although I'm conscious that's late, it will be recorded, but it's not. I just want to flag that this is specifically about how partners can help their customers. This isn't a sales event. This is actually people in my product team talking about how our products can meet their needs as partners. So hopefully they'll get a lot of value out of it. But yeah, it will be taped and I'm sure they can watch a recording.
Sounds like the perfect geek fest. I'm going to have to sign up for it. If you do want to make sure you sign up, and please do look at the show notes. There'll be a link to do that. Thanks again, Ben, for coming on, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Ryan.
I've got some updates for you, of course. And the first one is something from Sumday. They are introducing an AI bot to help you to get through some of the data and information on the platform. So for those of you that you don't know what Sumday is all about, they are a carbon tracking and management platform. You can connect that into Xero. And as you reminded me earlier on, Ryan, because I'd forgotten about this, but it is actually available free of charge for 12 months if you sign up before April. That was announced actually back in April as well. There's some nice synchronicity to that. But Sumday is like lots of the carbon accounting platforms, and you connect it into your accounting data, and then you can start to scoop out that information to do an analysis of what your kind of carbon footprint and carbon impact is from a business point of view. We talked a lot about these in terms of there are certain elements of limitation in what you can do with some of these platforms, but also from conversations that I've had with lots of people, including I was at Sage Earth as well. They are investing heaps of time and effort and money in developing these platforms out so they can get more granular and more into the detail. And this is just one of those developments. The idea of this is that as you start to deeper dive into your data and information from your business, is that it does take a little bit of untangling, but also you will probably find that some of your team want to understand some of that information in an easier way. So this AI functionality allows you to cut through the jargon, which I think is really important. It allows you to review the data that you've got in Xero or Sumday and collate that together, or to analyze it in a different way. It also helps you to build a business case if you want to start a particular sustainability project, which I think is a really great idea. That's quite cool, and being able to be proactive. And it helps you to analyze your data so that you can communicate that out and share it with your team or your customers, which, with the requirements that we have here in the UK and more broadly with some of the European stuff coming through, we know that if you're part of a supply chain, this is something that your customers and suppliers may be asking you as a business about. So if you can provide this information really easily, then that's great. New capability is launching this month in October. And so it'll be there if you're already signed up Sumday and using that connect to Xero. If you're not signed up, then as I said, you've got 12 months free if you do so before April. So it may well be worth exploring this and seeing how that functionality develops over the next few months. And then you can make an informed choice when your 12-month free subscription expires.
All sounds very interesting, but you did ruin my follow-up question, which was going to be, when are they releasing this? And you said October, where I was hoping you would then reply with someday, Ryan. They're releasing it someday.
Someday soon.
Someday soon. But we can't do that now. So I'm just going to move on to my next app news topic. And I picked up a discussion, in fact, a podcast, I can't believe there's another one out there, about AI native payments. So we've had AI, I guess, that's now taking over the entire of the OCR space, replacing the OCR space essentially for data collection. We've had it for a while in the reporting and forecasting space, probably not as effective in there or as reliable as in the OCR element. We've had it in bank reconciliations, and now it's being brought into payments. Now, what is AI in payments? Essentially, it's auto payment runs. So you have the rules, the boundaries, the barriers you bring in, and then the AI agent in the background will trigger and create the payment runs and send them on the approval run based on what you've trained it to do. Now, are we ready for this yet? Are we ready for one of the biggest risk areas to be taken over by AI? I'm not certain. And how much of this differs to the likes of Payhawk, where you put in that you want payments to happen on the due date for every invoice, or for most ones, you exempt certain suppliers, and it does it just on a bot, not an AI platform. I can't think to myself too much at this stage about how much AI is in there rather than just using a buzzword. And anything that I've looked at on this, and the system that was talking about this on the podcast was Forwardly, where actually they've really explained what AI is doing that's different to what was already out there in the market. Now, not a lot, I guess, not many of these tools have that kind of auto scheduling. You can future date payments, but you can't auto create, but they are out there. I believe Pleo had something similar. So I think, is it really something that's needed? Is it something that we want at this stage? Is it just a buzzword? What do you think, John?
On the face of it, as you describe it, it doesn't sound that exciting, and so it doesn't sound too risky. But if you're thinking about even a small organization, small business, or small charity, whatever, managing cash is probably one of the most challenging things. Managing cash flow can be one of the most challenging things. And I think this is an area where AI could certainly support that, and not just around making payments, but also just more generally like that currently I was going to say currency management. I guess it's not necessarily currency management, but being able to say, hey, oh, do you know what? We've had a customer payment that's come in and we don't have any payment scheduled. So maybe we could put this into a savings account and be a bit more proactive. But that's something that as a business owner or as a finance director, finance controller or something, that's something that you would have to do fairly manually. Yes, you could have sweeps set up with bank accounts and other things, but those only work with certain accounts and certain industries and things. So for me, the power of AI when it comes to managing money is much more around not necessarily making payments, but it's around actually proactively making the most of the resource that you've got there for you. And like I say, that could be about putting it into a savings account temporarily. It could be putting it into a deposit account for longer term. It could be anticipating what those scheduled incomings and outgoings look like, and then managing those payments. If it was going to manage payments, for example, manage those payments in a way that maximizes the benefit for you. Because again, that's something that to do that yourself on a day-to-day basis, particularly when you start to get volumes, is really challenging, right? It's not something that's easily done to say, how can I eke out the most interest or the most opportunity to benefit? And I guess the flip side of that would be around chasing payments from customers and making sure that credit control is like proactive. So that would be, for me, if I had lots of money and could invest in something like this, would be where I'd be focusing my AI investment for cash management.
I completely agree on all of that, John. And I think that a simple thing that it's not even trying to make the most out of interest, but looking at your finance system, working out, well, when are my liabilities for PAYE, VAT, corporation tax due, making sure that they're put to one side, and then you've got that pool and what you want to do with it. That is critical. But you said about chasing payments, and that works perfectly into my next little bit from Adfin. So Adfin, obviously, payment and receipting tool, and they have brought out Adfin Autopilot, which is an end-to-end agentic AI tool, essentially, that is going to be automatically chasing your customers for debt. So it will have message templates and it will adapt them with relevant context, with relevant terminology, and send them automatically based on, once again, the guardrails you put in place. Now, we've had templates for a long time, the likes of Chaser, but they're rigid. You've got specific wording, you get it to come from a certain person, and it works on an escalation process based on dates. But an agentic AI tool can be much more subjective. So with certain customers, or if you need certain cash flow and you can see that, you can do that automatically. Great little thing that Adfin brought out. We're really intrigued to see how that evolves over time, especially as they were, correct me if I'm wrong, newcomer of the year in the Digital Disruptor Awards. So they're having a huge impact in the UK accounting space at the moment. And as well as the Adfin Autopilot, they've also released the ability to receive bank transfers directly inside the system. So rather than just, I guess, paying by card or paying by direct debit, etc., bank transfers go directly through the Adfin platform and mark your invoices as paid.
Yeah, I was talking to Tom and the team about this functionality, and I think this is just the start of what they're wanting to develop here in terms of, I was discussing with them about the capability of interest and charges to overdue amounts, the statutory amounts you're entitled to. I know that's something that they're very keen to do, because the reality is that we talked about Chaser. That's something that's not really available on the Chaser platform, but it is available in Satago if people are familiar with that. But again, Satago are kind of deviated away from kind of core credit control and moved into financing and really lost their way in that respect. And this is a big opportunity where that kind of automation of that side of things could add a lot. And again, we talk a lot about the challenges around late payments for small and medium-sized businesses. And we've also talked about the fact that many small and medium-sized businesses are complicit in part of the problem. And part of this complicity for me is that they're not willing to charge interest and charges, even though it's a statutory right, on overdue amounts, because they fear that they'll lose potentially some work. Those fears are usually unfounded, and I'm not being funny, but if you're going to lose work from someone who's not willing to pay you, then you've already lost twice. Why worry about that? And yeah, I think this is really cool. And of course, Adfin as well have doubled down on AI in particular, because a lot of their integrations are built around MCP functionality, which is, I guess, the new API for the AI world. Yeah, really exciting for them to launch this functionality into the product. I have an update from Karbon with an integration with Spotlight reporting. And I must admit, I read the press release from Spotlight and my mind boggled, because I couldn't quite cut through the jargon and understand exactly what it was. So I actually had to deep dive into the support article about how to set up this integration between the two products. But essentially what this is all about is, for those of you that you don't know, Karbon is like a practice management tool. It's aimed at, I guess, medium-sized accounting practices at the moment, has a whole bunch of functionality in there, which is driven really around task and email management. And then there's more gradually morphed into time recording and fees and other things that we'd see a more core practice management solution. And then Spotlight Reporting is, I guess, like the OG of reporting in the Xero world, right? They were probably one of the first tools out there that integrated with Xero to enable you to do dashboards, reporting, consolidations, and various other things. And essentially what this integration between the two products is all about is about being able to schedule Spotlight reports for your clients from that kind of task management functionality in Karbon, and then actually automate that process such that you can have a trigger or a task that's in Karbon. Once you arrive at that trigger, it'll go off to Spotlight, it'll generate the reports, and you can do this automatically. And you can actually have that report filed back into Karbon as well. So it's all there in one place. It's all visible to you as a user. And then, of course, you could send that out to your client using one of your various automations. And the other thing that you can also see is you've got then some visibility over how many of our clients in our client base are having regular management reports produced by this integration, and how many just look like they're just an annual compliance client, and maybe we want to encourage them to sign up to something else. So there's two opportunities here. There's an automation opportunity, which is great, but there's also like an upselling opportunity once you get into the data in a little bit more detail to see where your missing gaps are potentially.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think this is another thing that Karbon are quite being very clear on in using their task management system to automate a lot of what's going on. And we saw this with an acquisition recently for that kind of data analysis perspective, and now integrating into a reporting tool makes a lot of sense. I've got something completely different. Now, we've talked a lot about inventory tools. We've got one on the pod this week, but Katana, which is an inventory tool, I think from the US, at least over from North America side, have released a free plan. Now, this is not something we see very often from inventory-specific tools. Now, they've limited it down massively. So it's got full feature functionality of what they call their Pro Plus, so very advanced, but they're limited to 30 SKUs. So essentially 30 products and only 3 locations. Now, locations, I don't think is that much of a limiting factor. You tend to have just one warehouse if you're relatively small, and therefore could play with the system. 30 SKUs, though, is very limiting. But it does mean that you can play with the system. So you can start using it, roll it out for maybe a very specific area inside the business where you can demo it, test it, try and break it to some extent without having to scribe and go through a complex implementation plan. And this is something I think more inventory tools should do. And the reason for that is that these are always very complex. And unless you're going for a specialist, trying to get it to work for you can take quite a while and doesn't always work because you're not utilize the full functionality, etc. So my advice is that if you are an inventory tool, maybe bring out a free plan, limit it if you can do from like Katana to a very small subset of functionality, even if that is just from stock items, and then bring business in just from them exploring and playing around with different tools. So I'm not seeing before at all in the inventory space. We've seen it in finance, but yeah, I think it's quite a unique approach from Katana here.
It's definitely unique, and that freemium model, I guess, is how quite a lot of software started out in the world. You don't see it that often anymore, like you say, but I guess 30 SKUs is a smallish number, but I guess for maybe a small e-commerce business or maybe even a small charity, that might be something that would be appealing to them. But yeah, it's a great way of getting into something a little bit more complex for sure. I've got an update from WorkGuru, which is a project management tool. Again, I think from the US. Am I right there, or is it from
Australia, I believe, or at least Australia, New Zealand area?
Yeah. They've added in some additional features into the product. In particular, one thing that really appeals to me is some project document templates. So this is an ability to, when you're creating projects, particularly if you're doing relatively repetitive work, is that you can obviously have a template built into there so that you can then look at how you're going to phase out and plan that and include some more details in there, which obviously means that when you're starting from scratch with a new project every time, you don't have to build it out every time, which clearly is going to save you quite a neat amount of time. There are also purchase templates from POs. So this is the ability to, when you create a purchase order, you can flip this into a purchase invoice. And you've got some additional default settings around warehousing as well, because you can do some elements of warehousing. And these are, interestingly, you can do these at an individual user level or at a business-wide level. So you've got some different things that are going on. And then the last couple of little bits that are in there, but one which really appeals to me, which I'll leave to last, but you've got the ability to look at PO summaries by their expected date of when they're going to come in. Again, we talked a little bit about cash management before. This is more around managing your purchases and inventory to a degree and just getting a bit of a view on when you might have to commit to making payments, which is neat. And then another thing which I really like, because I think this is something that is missing in quite a lot of products, is a connection into an OCR product. So they have a connection into Easy Bills. So you can upload a PO direct from Easy Bills into the product. And of course, from a processing point of view, that saves a huge heap of time. So that's really, really neat.
Yeah, we've talked about it so many times, haven't we, John? A lot on the inventory side, but inventory project management, where that OCR integration is critical, because so many businesses now are using these types of tools, and then you bring in a more complex system and they have to go back to working manually. And it's a big frustration and kind of change management issue. The only challenge that's on that is that Easy Bills is probably the prime one everyone builds into, but the user interface is very challenging. So especially when it comes to staff expenses, if you've got back office team using it just for overheads or cost of sales, that can work quite effectively. But as soon as you want to work staff expenses, it's not the most intuitive system to work with. And so I would love that some of these more pretty systems that would just listen to us, John, and just integrate in. But who knows? We're just amateurs in this space.
You're so shallow, Ryan. I want a pretty tool to deal with.
I do. I like working with pretty people. I don't know why I'm working with you. Moving on to a little bit about news from Employment Hero here. They have brought in leave entitlement automatic calculations for offboarding. Now, this sounds like something minor, but it's a big frustration for a lot of HR teams where you've got someone that's leaving now. They've got maybe a complex leave entitlement package, especially nowadays where they might be doing part-time or flexible working or annualized hours, and the system can effectively calculate what their remaining leave balance will be at the end of their notice period, which is essentially how it needs to work. Great little bit that's been brought in there, and I've not seen HR tools really do this, and because it's in the HR system, it'll automatically then, if there's additional pay or they need to make a decision on what to do with that, that will feed directly into the payroll aspect as well. Then a few little releases. That was I guess the big one I like, but a few little releases where you can now access your payroll documents directly from inside the Employment Hero Work app. You've got a dark mode for it, which is becoming more and more required for accessibility issues. And then the ability to post jobs directly to Indeed via the jobs board. This is something that they've been building out in the UK for quite a while. So the fact they've got that functionality now to post directly there from your job management or I guess recruitment process directly inside the HR tool is a plus.
Absolutely, it is. And I think, like you say, that kind of auto leave calculation is just something that has to be done, right? But making that as seamless as possible is just another example of like how you can just chip away at the little small bits that make a real tangible difference. And finally, I've got a little bit of news which is served up to us from FreeAgent, but actually is around some research that's been done on behalf of Hiscox Insurance. And it's looking at the prevalence of cyber attacks. Of course, you can't do anything in this world without mentioning Marks and Spencer's and Co-op more recently. And there is a headline out today saying that the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack is the most expensive in UK history, costing them £1.9 billion, which is absolutely staggering. But the irony with all of this is that 6 in 10 UK small businesses apparently were hit by at least one cyber attack in the last year alone. And of course, they don't really make the news because they're not big like Marks and Spencer's and Jaguar. And maybe that impact isn't felt as tangibly for us as customers and consumers of those businesses as well. But 6 out of 10 is a staggering number. And of course, this is a huge challenge in terms of a growing threat to businesses and organizations. And I must admit, probably an area where I don't think businesses maybe take this quite as seriously as other matters. And I know, having talked about cyber issues at places like Digital Accountancy Show this year, actually, I don't think small accounting firms are taking this seriously either, and they need to really make some not overly expensive investments, but take some steps to address some of these things. And one of the big things about this, of course, is that a successful attack can disrupt a business and operations. It can increase costs. It means that you can lose your sensitive data, which may have a broader impact on you in terms of fines from regulators, etc. And within this research, it said that those who had faced some kind of cyber crime, 30% said the incident had materially threatened the solvency or viability of their business. If 6 out of 10 businesses are being affected, 2 out of those 10 businesses are potentially being put at risk of not being around in the next sort of 12 months or so, which that's a big old number, right? And we all know, I guess we all should know what we should be doing in terms of making sure that we keep security packages installed. So that could be firewalls, it could be password managers, antivirus, etc., but you should have all of these in place. You should encourage users to use password managers, or at least to have a bare minimum of multi-factor authentication for all of the products you've got. And I would say, frankly, if you're talking to a supplier in our market that doesn't have multi-factor authentication as a baseline, you shouldn't even give them a second thought. You need to make sure, obviously, that you keep all of your software updates up to date on your products. So whether that's your Windows updates, your Apple updates, etc. I know they can be irritating and they can be a pain in the backside to manage, but that should happen. And we talked about this as well with the AWS outage on the previous episode about how do you manage backups, particularly as you move more and more into the cloud. This is something that you need to have access to if you do have a cyber attack and your systems are disrupted. One of the fundamental things is being able to get back up and running as quickly as possible. And even if you take daily backups, the reality is it's probably going to take you 24 to 48 hours minimum to get everything restored and up and running. I can tell you from experience, from practice, that when we run our tests on data integrity and run a cyber incident scenario, the spinning up a new data center and getting that data up and ready for you does take a reasonable amount of time, and so you should be aware about that. And then finally, the last couple of points is, make sure you've got user access control managed effectively. So not everyone needs to have access to finance systems. Not everyone needs to have access to all of your company documentation. So try and make sure that's managed in an effective way. And I would say the best way to do that is to have security groups set up in your system, have 3 levels, which can be like high, medium, low. And then you can add people to those groups. And that's a really simple way of managing access rather than trying to do it on a one-by-one basis. And the final bit is to make sure you've got insurance. So I would say the vast majority of large businesses do have some level of cyber insurance, but smaller businesses are less likely to pay for it. And of course, that means that if you do have an incident, you're not going to be able to potentially claim for any costs, ransoms, etc., etc. And I will say that, from talking to businesses in the US, cyber insurance effectively now is mandatory. And actually, that mandatory cyber insurance comes with a whole bunch of requirements in terms of the kind of things that you need to have done to have certain security measures in place. And those insurers will assess those, and clearly they will not pay out if you don't have those. There is plenty of great resources as well for anyone that's concerned about cyber. There's the National Cyber Institute. There's a whole bunch of stuff around Cyber Essentials Plus that you can get access to. And of course, that will start you down a path of being aware of some of the issues and some of the things that you can put in place. And there are also a bunch of great, reliable consultants who can come in and do things like cyber reviews for you, just to really make you aware of where your risks are in your business. And they do not cost an arm and a leg. This is one of the things is I think people think about cyber as being something that's all consuming and incredibly costly, but actually it's not too bad. And my final point on this is if you want to do anything specific on cyber, the most important thing that you do is train your staff and your people, because they are the weakest link. You can invest all the money in the world in keeping your software up to date and having good antivirus, etc. But the person that clicks on that email link that's sent to them that's fraudulent, or that misreads something and accidentally opens up their systems to someone trying to hack into your business, it's always a person. If you look at the M&S stuff, if you look at the Jaguar Land Rover stuff, if you look at anything, it's a person that's done it, not the system itself that's broken down.
Yeah, it's quite scary, isn't it? The 2 in 10 that could go out of business because of it is scary, and does and should make everyone that's listening to this want to do something, even if it's just exploring what the options are in front of them. What a happy note to finish app news on this week. And let's move into something that should be a little bit more upbeat, and that's our discussion with Employment Hero. We are back with Kevin Fitzgerald, MD of UK for Employment Hero. And we're going to be talking about, let's rehash where we were. We talked about payroll. We talked about the criticality of a payroll system, an integrated payroll system that brings HR together. But what's most important for listeners is actually how they get involved and work with the software that they think can benefit themselves and their clients. And that comes down to a partner or bureau program. And we've had some journey with Employment Hero over the past. Kevin, what have you learned from what's been quite ever changing way you've been working with the accounting market over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it looks good to be back, right? And certainly a hot topic. And it's a passionate topic, right? And we're getting a lot of feedback still around how we're approaching what I call like the next phase of developing the bureaus inside of accounting firms. We got to go back a year, Ryan. I really, like, when I took over this role and thought about bureaus, I looked at bureaus and I was like, hey, I worked in a bureau in 1999. That's where I started my accounting qualifications, right? Like, we had our own internal bureau. I was a bit like, nothing's changed. Like, no one's really, the technology has changed, but like the brand of bureaus, the perception maybe, right? And I was like, there's so many specialist, like brilliant people that are running bureaus, that are working in bureaus, that are basically the compliance backbone of SMEs in the UK. What are we going to do to help them? And if I was really critical, like I just like sat and looked at it in the UK and I was like, it's becoming a race to the bottom for who can be the cheapest payroll software per payslip. And that's only going to end in a stagnation for a lot of businesses because tech companies will run out of money, right? Like, for investing in it. It could potentially devalue like what people are doing because like accounting firms could continue to see it as a loss leader. Yeah. And it just felt like no one was doing it right in the market. So we took a break from signing up new partners probably around April, May last year for a few months. And a big part of it was like, I wanted us to be really proud over the product that we were delivering. Whereas I felt like we were delivering the same product that competitors were, which was a compliant payroll bureau product, which is fine. But we're in the age where technology is changing rapidly. And I just felt like there was an opportunity to actually get behind this and say, well, let's change it, not follow what everybody is doing and just be another player in the bureau space. So we looked at like the product offering and we had a real, like a forming thesis at the time that payroll HR system consolidation was rife. We were already on this pathway, right? Like, we've had payroll and HR under one system, one hood, the Employment Hero brand for at least 4 years now. But April, May last year, I was starting to see SMEs say, hey, yeah, we just want to consolidate. They maybe weren't exactly sure why, but they were like, it just makes sense to have it in one place. So I sat with our product team, sat with some bureaus and said, what do you want? There were some bureaus that said, we just want a compliant bureau software and don't mess around with it and don't change anything. And we said, fine, it's absolutely fine. And we respect that. But some others were saying, we've got a much stronger relationship with our client from a like holistic business level, right? And we're talking to them about different things and improving in all parts of their business. And it was almost like there was a trigger then around like when the general election was called and like employment law was becoming a very hot topic, right? What's going to change? And I think people saw the opportunity, but also the risk there that if SMEs didn't have a good HR system, like conjoined with their payroll system, they could have a bit of exposure going into this calendar year. And I wouldn't say we nailed the thesis, but like the majority of what we believed has actually come to life. Like, consolidation of systems is rife. And where I think we've done really well now in the bureau space is, instead of having a standalone bureau like product, bureaus can take advantage of the consolidation opportunity, right? So if they have a client that needs a HR tech system as well, and they want to consolidate, it's much easier for them to work with us and the client to get the client set up on HR as well. And it has absolutely no impact to how they, own the relationship with the client from a payroll perspective and the software like experience. So previously, we didn't have a way to actually connect it all together. It was kind of like bureau was an island on its own. Now we brought it into the fold and like we built a bureau client portal, right? So bureaus can actually say, I've got this client, like they've come to me and they need some, they'd like to look at HR tech. If they come through and they say yes to us and they choose us, we can provision their HR instance directly connected to their bureau instance, right? So they actually are logging into Employment Hero. They're seeing all their payroll reports that the bureau has actually prepared for them and delivered, and the communication through Employment Hero. And then they have the same access to the HR system to do what they need to do to run HR on their side for their business. So that's been exciting for us because I don't think there's been a true development in the bureau space for such a long time. As I said, it just became a compliance tool. People were fighting like per pay slip, like how low can we go? And I was like, you got to understand that like the economics of a situation like that mean the vendors may end up like making plenty of sales, but over time they'll run out of money to invest in the product. But the SMEs will end up with just a pretty like old school, like old version of technology, and it could be compliant, but I don't think it'd be great for them.
Yeah, and that goes back to, I guess, our earlier discussions where you end up on that stagnated tool and it becomes a compliance risk over time because they're not investing in it and building that out. And I think that you talk about the lack of investment in the bureau product, but actually I think there's been a lack of investment in payroll teams in bureaus because they're always looked at as just that churn. If you get payroll for a client, it is a stickiness. Like they're more likely to stay as a client. That's how it's been looked at. But as we move into this kind of world of AI and lots of other areas of what we do being automated, the experience part becomes really critical. And payroll is really good for that because it's all about trust. It's all about reliability. And the ability to go beyond that now. Payroll is not just a compliance engine. It's now your lead engine for doing more services. Going into that HR space is something that you can only do with a fully integrated tool. So I guess what you're building here is something that is future-proofing a firm for maybe how they would run a payroll department going forward.
Yeah, like I think there's quite distinctive views from the firms at the moment, right? Some are like, oh, our clients really aren't asking us about HR. And then there's some who are, we're getting asked a lot because of employment law changes, right? And we're not actually ready to have that conversation, and we've got a HR consultant that we refer the business to. But it really depends on the relationship with the client, right? And how close you are to them. I think if you ask the right questions, obviously, I think you'll find out that they do need like a HR solution or certainly a steer and maybe when they actually will need it, like at a certain size. But for a lot of the firms, and certainly, look, it's easy for me to say they're forward looking. There's probably a little bit of bias in it, but they are thinking about the broader employment package, like especially HR technology for their clients. I hope it changes maybe some of the views on payroll as a loss leader, because the flip side of it is it's also the most stickiest service that you can give. So to me, that doesn't actually add up. But what a great way to actually go to the client and bring them something that maybe they hadn't thought about, like the consolidation piece. And
it's added value, right? Being that central point where they come to their accountant for the advice on what they do for their general business, and you have an answer. You don't necessarily have to do it yourself, but you have an answer, and that's what a partnership is all about. But you've made some changes as well, not only, I guess, in bringing it back, but my understanding is the pricing has changed. So how does that work now?
Yeah, our mission is to make employment more valuable and easier, and like a lot of companies have like pretty big statements like that, right? But we hold ourselves to account really well, right? So make employment more valuable. There's got to be a tangible piece to that, like, and it's probably the ex-accountant in me. I'm like, show me the number, prove it. So we're also in a competitive stance where we see a huge opportunity in the UK to like really help bureaus and firms develop. So we're basically offering the bureau software unlimited usage for a year. So if you have 10 clients or 100 or 1,000, the maximum that you'll ever pay us is £1,000 a year. People are worried then, based on some behaviors with competitors, that, you'll just whack up the price in year 2. I'm saying to people, if you want to sign for 5 years, we'll do it for 5 years. That doesn't mean you're locked in to pay us for 5 years. If you want to leave after 30 days because you're not happy, you're out. We'll let you out of contract. And we don't mean to sound arrogant, but we're backing ourselves here. We're not locking people into really pointy, painful contracts. We're saying, come and give us a go and we'll prove ourselves. Yeah,
and that's because I guess, the same belief I've got in that businesses now or in the future will want that fully integrated HR and payroll element. So if they've got payroll as the core, it makes sense to them to overlay the HR side. And that's essentially where you'll make money.
Yeah. And look, we also totally respect, we pay referrals, right? And a bureau manager comes to us and says, I've got a client who needs HR software. They sign up, we'll pay them 20%. You move into the firms, sometimes the firms don't want to take referrals. We'll discount like for the client, the end client, if they want to pass it on. So we're being super flexible with this, right? Like, and just saying, we're not here for a short sugar hit. Like, we really want to transform how bureaus and firms operate. Come on the journey with us long term. We'll put like £40 million into R&D this year alone. I don't think there's many players at our size that could commit to that.
Yeah.
And we're growing incredibly fast, right? Yeah, we're proud of what we're doing. I'm glad we took that break from the bureau space last year. Just didn't think we were doing the right things, and I felt strongly about it. And I know we got slapped a little bit, like, and that's fine. But now
Well,
we're back.
it's all about effective communication, right? And putting it when it hasn't worked and then changing things. And
Yeah.
part of that, I know, is you've brought in the infamous Sam Horner into the space, which hopefully will help bring people back on board. Because I know Sam's been in this space for a really long time, especially in the UK. And much respect for him. Great capture for you.
Yeah, delighted. And we've been spending a lot of time together speaking to firms and bureaus, like, pretty much every day at the moment. And he's the UK like specialist, right, like in this channel, and it's good. Like, he saw what we were trying to do, and he saw the excitement, and he saw we were trying to do the right thing. And so delighted to get them into the team, and I'm learning lots from at the moment.
Yeah. Look, thanks again for coming on, Kevin. Anyone's listening, if you haven't actually heard of Sam Horner, I don't know where you've been, but connect with him on LinkedIn. And hopefully we'll get him on the show at some point and they can hear from him directly.
Yeah, definitely.
And that brings another Digi-Tools and Accrual World podcast to a close. Thank you for listening. If you do want to make sure you catch future episodes, please do subscribe, leave a review. And also, my strong advice is subscribe to our newsletter, because you get that before even the podcast gets released. And if you want to attend the Digital Disruptor Awards next year, although there is not a formal sign-up process, drop us a message. We'll put down your name. We'll make sure you get notified of the tickets being released way before anyone else does. Once again, thanks for listening, and hopefully catch you next week.